Thank you, General Christmas. I'm privileged now to introduce another speaker for you, Cat Marine, author of probably the greatest book written on the Vietnam War, The Village, and somebody who I traveled with to Baghdad in March of 2003. Later on, wrote a book about that as well, called The March Up. Mr. Bing West. Sir.
General Christmas, General Lukeman, Paul, Eric, Matt, the entire committee who put together this monument, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Caps. I think it is really appropriate that we be here today, and Paul, my hat is off to you and your team for working for so many years to do this. And I will try to put this in a little bit of perspective for all of you, especially maybe for the wives, because sometimes husbands are not particularly articulate, and you may never have really yet grasped what the Combined Action Platoon was really all about. So what I'd like to do is try to put it within a context. But before I do that, I'd like to remind us all about in context in anyone. So I'll start with Ron Christmas, my dear friend, who, of course, is famous always among Marines for his fight at Way City, which was the toughest fight. Oh, wow. That was probably the toughest fight since Okinawa in World War II. And when Ron was hit several times, he gave his watch to Charlie, and Charlie was worried that may be because Ron thought he was kicking the bucket and he was giving his watch to somebody else. And Ron came back later, and I was really surprised to hear that from General Lukeman that $250 million so far has been raised for this wonderful museum, and that was because of the doggedness of Ron starting out and doing all that. Now, he had to because he owed something else back that only a few of us know, but I'm going to share with you because I know you won't spread it to anybody. When Ron was, and there are a lot of stories about this, but anyway, at one point when Ron is in Way, fighting was fierce, and you couldn't turn a building around a block of a building without getting whacked. And for some reason, his battalion commander turned to him and said, Ron, I have a guest here. You're going to take him out. You're going to show him around, and don't get him killed. And that was Walter Cronkite of CBS, who was then, at that time, the voice of America. So it was Ron who took Walter around Way City, kept him alive. Some of us asked why. And brought him back, and I don't know what you did, Ron, but when Cronkite got back on television, he was so shaken the first night. I remember I was home watching this. He's sitting there, and his face was a little bit white, and he said, I have just been to Way, and we cannot win that war. And so some of us have said that was all due to Ron, if he had just kind of left them somewhere. Now let me go to the combined. I could tell a Lukeman story, too, about the march up, but I'm going to hold that one for now. However, there'll be a price unless he wants to be blackmailed. But then we come to the Combined Action Platoon and trying to put it in context. Well, the thing about the Combined Action Platoon was that all of you were simply told, you're going out to a village, and you're going to live there, and don't get your ass shot off, and don't allow any of the enemy in. Now, when you consider that was the essence of what it was. You went into a village, and then in order to stay alive, you had to patrol every single night. And I calculated, and others have too, that the average Combined Action Platoon in 1 year conducted 1,000 patrols. And we know, of course, you can't do that without losing people. And that's why it's appropriate that we are here today to be honoring those who can't be with us, because we all know out there at night it's just luck whether you're here and you're not. But the interesting thing when we were out and I remember distinctly about that, you just have maybe 4 or 5 Marines and 4 or 5 Neoquans, popular forces, farmers who were paid $30 a month. They wanted nothing to do with this. I mean, they had no training. If they were killed, their families would get nothing. And all of a sudden, they have these Marines who are tugging at them and saying, come on, I'm going out tonight, you're coming with me. So at first, it wasn't exactly voluntary. It would be that you had to kind of tug them to come along. And I remember one of the Vietnamese once said to me, but in essence, he said, you have such an advantage over all of us. And I said, why? And he said, because you are bombs. And I thought, what's he talking about? And then he showed me the hand grenade. And I realized when you got in the fights, the big difference we had versus the Viet Cong and the NVA, it was that everyone in America and the Dominican Republic, I don't think of any other countries, maybe Cuba, knows that when you throw, you have to put your shoulder back and lean forward and then throw. So as a consequence, when you look at anyone else, Germans, French, Vietnamese, they throw like this. So when you get into the fight at night, and it's pitch black, and we had tracers that are red, and I don't know why, but the communist forces all have green tracers. And they had in Iraq, too. It's strange. And it looked like Christmas. You know, your stream of red's going out, their stream of green is going in, and you're dogging back and forth. When you pull those grenades with all the adrenaline we had, we could throw a grenade from here all the way to the other side of the upstairs there, and they couldn't. And that was our great single advantage in those night fights. Then when the daylight would come, you'd stroll around the village. In my village, we had a lot of duck eggs, peanuts, Bami Ba beer, and you'd chat with the villagers, and then nightfall would come, and the villagers would go back into their hooches, and it was game on again. And the only thing we had to, I mean, you look at what we were doing in Afghanistan and Iraq, those are separate subjects, but we were spending billions and billions of dollars. Our combined action platoons had nothing but one corpsman. And he was always overworked because the only thing we could give was his knowledge. We didn't have a lot of supplies. We had nothing to give them. So the idea that we were somehow buying them, we were helping them because we were all working together. And that gets to the point that Ron was making. That's my second point, and that is the cooperation. Let me read to you what a Vietnamese wrote in my village at the beginning of 1967. And our squad leader at the time was a good squad leader by the name of White. And this is the letter that the village chief asked me to bring home to give to his parents. To Sergeant J.D. White family, my name is Trow, 2nd Village Chief working with Sergeant White and squad. Our people thank him very much because he is very good man. Every day he is few to sleep. He works too much. My people are poor. And when they see a Marine, they very happy. When VC come to people, people come to talk to Sergeant White, so Sergeant White can talk to PF, the Neoquans, and Marine to fight VC, maybe die. I'll say a happy new year to you. God bless you, your friend always, Ho Van Trow. Wow, what more can you say? That was the essence. You became so much part of them, and they became so much part of you. And then you ask, well, was it effective? And here I go, Ron gave the perfect introduction. He said there he was up at the High Van Pass, which is just this tiny little place. It's just that tiny little place. But when the North Vietnamese came down in February of 1968, they attacked with 40,000. 10,000 of them fought Ron. He was up against 10,000. 30,000 others aimed for Da Nang, the main city, and they were coming in from the mountains, probably about 15. They had to go about 15 miles. It should take you one day or maybe 2 days. But Not one of the North Vietnamese units ever got to Da Nang. As Ron pointed out, what happened was we had the combined action platoons out there, and the village network, villagers saying to each other, my God, you see all these people in khaki uniforms coming. And so they told the Neoquans, the PFs told the Marines, they said, we better get ready. And when the North Vietnamese came to try to burst through, they couldn't. For 11 days straight, the 47 combined action platoons in that province fought. 11 straight days they were attacked, and not one of them went under. And 47% of all the attacks at the time of Tet in the Marine area were aimed at the Caps, because if they couldn't get the Caps out of the way, they couldn't get anywhere. That was pretty amazing. Then you can all say to yourselves, well, if you were so darn good, why didn't they have more of you, and why didn't they do it all over Vietnam? There you come to the issue of strategy. General Westmoreland was in charge. He was an army general in Saigon, which is about 300 miles south of Da Nang. General Westmoreland believed the key to winning the war was to kill the North Vietnamese soldiers, called search and destroy. The Marines said no, because those soldiers, the only reason they're coming here is to get in the lowlands where the population is. If they can't do that, they can't win. And if they get in the lowlands, then they have to fight us. We don't have to go up into the mountains after them. And so they said, the Marines said, our first job is to protect the population. So now you have the commander in Saigon, who's in charge of the entire Vietnam, and the Marine General Walt up in the north, and they don't like each other at all, and they totally disagree. So we were never able to have a conversation, which is really interesting about high politics. There was never a meeting where all the generals sat together and said, let's have it out and decide whether this is a good program or not. So ironically, we all who were in the combined action platoons just remained kind of an afterthought. It never really caught on as a strategy at the top. However, when you look at what happened in Vietnam, the North Vietnamese took South Vietnam by using tanks and artillery given to them by China and the Soviet Union. Some of these stories, like Ken Burns' movie, are just baloney, because the one thing that never happened, the people never went over to the north. And even today, when you go back, I went back to my village in 2000, and a couple of amazing things happened. The first thing is that the villagers knew me. I thought, nah, this couldn't be. And then my interpreter, who was a great guy, Charlie, he said, why do you think they don't know you, Bing? He said, when you were here, those villagers every day were going out and picking up individual corns of rice, individual plants. Each of them had a field about half the size of this amphitheater. That's it. That was their livelihood. That was everything they ever did for their lives. And he said, so supposing you did that every day of your life and nothing else, and for 1 year you had those 12 crazy Americans with you, would you remember them? And they did. I had my book with me at the time, The Village, and I showed them the pictures, and the old Mamasans, who used to be good-looking, well, we won't go there. But anyway, the old Mamasans are looking, and they're pointing out the first names of the individual Marines. And I thought, wow. And that showed where the people, and Ron was indicating this, if you left it up to the people of Vietnam to have an honest election, they might elect General Lukeman, or they might elect General Christmas, or they might elect Paul. They wouldn't elect the people who now are in charge in Hanoi. They call them the 15%ers, because the people in charge want 15% all the way up the line for doing anything. So you turn to, all right, we weren't able to turn it into a strategy, but how good was the combined action platoon? Well, not just General Walt, I have many other quotes that most people believe, looking back, the Combined Action Platoon was the single most significant innovation in the 7 years of war. Nothing really compared to it. But I went back and I looked at all of history. Now, I want you to think of this for a minute. We had 450,000 Marines at one time or another in Vietnam. And the Marine High Command had the courage, the nerve to say, all right, we're going to take individual squads with a sergeant, no corporal, no captain, no gunny sergeant, and we're going to say, I'm going to give you 10 men, and you're going to go out to Bin Nia. You're going to go out to a village that no one has ever heard of before with 5,000 Vietnamese, and you're going to live there in the middle of a war when we're fighting 300,000 North Vietnamese. Wow. I have looked throughout history, and I can think of no other example where a foreign force of over 500,000 had the nerve, the courage, and the confidence in their Marines and in their sergeants to say, go ahead, we're sending you out there all by yourself. I mean, in the entire history of warfare, I'm still looking for another example. Now, you can say, well, then why did it take so long for anyone to pay any attention to the Combined Action Platoons? Well, I'll give you an example. My book, The Village, was taken off the Marine Corps reading list because I was told by the staff, it's irrelevant because we don't do that anymore. And then we went to Iraq and Afghanistan. And let me tell you, it was irrelevant in Iraq and Afghanistan because both countries are Muslim countries where you have believers and unbelievers, and we are the unbelievers. And you could not put 12 Americans willy-nilly into different isolated hamlets and expect that they would be accepted into the families. No, they wouldn't. And as outsiders, they wouldn't last one night. They would be betrayed. And so in Vietnam, you could do it because of the culture. You could not do it in a Muslim country. However, the Marine Corps is changing in certain ways, and it might be sending out units in the Filipino Islands in case of a war against China in order to be able to fire missiles at Chinese ships. And then they're going to be among Filipino villagers. Dollars to donuts, they're going to need the Combined Action Platoon again to survive out there. So it could come around in a big circle. And finally, I'd like to conclude simply by saying, well, give me one thing I can walk away with about why you think we did so well. Oh, that's very simple. It's this sentence. There were 209 villages into which the Combined Action Program was sent. So among all of us, we're in 209 different villages. Not one village, not one, ever fell back into enemy hands. That is a testimony to how good you really were. God bless you.